It was all good just a week ago, but now I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Like, share, subscribe. Big shout out to patrons and channel members getting to see this first. As some of you may remember, I had the pleasure of being interviewed about a week or so ago for the Chicago Crusader, where I said that that interview had become the GOAT of all interviews, particularly in the Black press, regarding my work on the myth and propaganda of Black buying power. Well, and now we have this. The Chicago Crusader from just yesterday, May 16th, campaign generates over $1 million in financial impact for Black community by Crusader staff. So I find this, I don't want to overdo it, but I feel a kind of way about how the timing of this and the way this story is told. As you see pictured here, members of the Economic Development Committee of the Chicago Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Inc. was with renowned fashion designer Barbara Bates of Bates Designs, who generously donated custom outerwear for the first and second place winners of the chapter's Buy Black campaign. All right. The Chicago Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated announced the resounding success of its award-winning Buy Black CAC campaign recently. In a powerful show of economic solidarity and community empowerment, the initiative, led by the chapter's Economic Development Committee, generated a remarkable $1,138,949.80 in documented purchases supporting Black-owned businesses, services, and charitable organizations. The campaign ran from November of last year through January of this year and the goal to inspire sorority members and others to intentionally support Black entrepreneurship. It's so anathema to my politics that I struggle with that word to this day. Or I would rephrase that and say it's what Kwame Ture used to say about the African rebelliousness that prevents us from speaking this English language that has been imposed through hostility. That's why I struggle with that word. It's in that same vein. Participants were encouraged to shop with Black-owned businesses or donate to Black-led charitable organizations. And there's no detail in this story, so maybe we can follow up later and get more details on that. But that's very clearly not necessarily Black-owned, but Black-led. The campaign demonstrated the powerful impact we can make when we intentionally invest in our communities. We are thrilled by the response. Forward to continuing this work, this important work, said co-chair Toy Salter. But this effort was more than a campaign. It was a correction to a deeply misunderstood belief about the economic strength of Black America. While Black consumer spending is often touted as exceeding $2 trillion annually, economists, including Dr. Jared Ball of Morgan State University, remind us that spending does not equal wealth. In fact, without targeted and strategic support for Black-owned institutions, this level of spending results in continued economic leakage and dependency. So this is a wild and mispresentation of my work and argument. One, I'm not an economist. And as I continue to point out, my work on this issue is based in my background in media studies and Africana studies. And I'm more assessing the gaps between what is reported by economists regarding economic data specific to the Black community and how it's and the gaps between between that research and data and how it's reported often in the Black press targeting Black audiences. So that's the intervention that I'm attempting and have been attempting to make. I am not an economist. One thing I do point out, though, leaning on the work of economists, referencing the work of economists, is that they don't do the things that are reported in stories like this to assess the conditions of the Black or any other community. Secondly, my argument is not that to counterbalance the fact that spending does not equal wealth, that therefore we should target and specifically support Black-owned institutions with the idea that that would address continued economic leakage and dependency. That's not my argument. So I am not saying that the response to my argument, which is itself based in research and data, and the arguments of economists that spending is not wealth, that buying power is not a measurement of income and wealth. I am not saying because that is true that therefore we should support Black businesses and that will lead to a material improvement. What I am saying is a misunderstanding of that mythology around buying power and Black capitalism inhibits our understanding of the economy and therefore what we might do to get ourselves out of this situation, which would likely largely involve, at minimum, as Dr. King said some years ago, federal involvement with a massive redistribution of billions of dollars. Or, as Du Bois said, cooperatives don't work because Black people don't have enough money to support the Black community. So, therefore, the federal government has to be involved, in which case it's socialism. All right. So that's one issue. Then in the next paragraph, currently a dollar circulates in the Black community for just 6 hours compared to 17 days in the white communities, 20 days in Asian communities and 21 days in Jewish communities. This means that nearly every dollar earned by Black households is immediately spent with businesses outside the community, leaving little opportunity for reinvestment or generational wealth building. So again, notice there's no citation here because there is no source to cite for this. And as we've been arguing for a long time, in a variety of ways, the circulating Black dollar mythology is just that. It's marketing mythology that is often misrepresented. There is no economist, there is no economic argument that makes this claim. Louise Story and Ebony Reed, in their work, we've shown that and talked with them about it, read it, showed it repeatedly. They go through the history of where that myth is and identify its, again, mythological origins. So this is, again, repeated in the Black press, which is, again, my argument about buying power, with no reference, no citation, further inhibiting an understanding of the economy or what to do about it. This is not helpful here. They go on. Meanwhile, the Hispanic community provides an example of what greater economic cohesion can begin to look like. And they go through the mythology again that the Latino community has its own buying power and they are more culturally unified and have a greater cultural cohesion than the Black community and therefore are able to marshal and pool their wealth in ways that the Black community cannot do. Now, again, they have to deal with the fact that the data doesn't support that. So they come back here right away to try to clean this up. But they still have to address the fact that Latino households still wealth disparities. And while it's greater than Black communities, the $62,000 approximate household wealth number they cite here is still far less than the 285,000 for white families. So again, Latinos have not improved their condition based on some greater cultural cohesion and a better understanding of the economy and circulating their dollars amongst their own communities. That is not how, to the extent that they have, that their communities have been improved. This is not how any community generates wealth. That is by circulating dollars among themselves with this idea that poor people circulating their dollars within their own communities can, again, generate the businesses and the support for those businesses and the ability for those businesses to scale their economies and grow and do all the things and to satisfy all the needs of the Black community. And as we've already seen in this story, they've already alluded to the fact that they're raising money for Black-led institutions that aren't even designed to support a specific Black-owned entity, and then they fall back on the mythology that because a Black-owned entity or a Black-owned business exists and is supported, it will therefore generate wealth for the community. There's no evidence that they cite for that, and I think that there's no evidence that they really can cite for that, given, again, the woeful conditions that the Black community continues to remain in. And as the previous story cited my point, referring back to Diedrich Muhammad and his colleagues on this stat, from 92 to 2012, 2 million Black-owned businesses were evolved, and the capture of the national sales revenue dropped. So this is not an issue of Black communities creating Black businesses and not supporting them because they're not culturally cohesive as much as Latinos. This is about all forms of other kinds of structural inequality and the simple fact that business doesn't create a solution to capitalist inequality. As they continue, when Black dollars are spent with Black businesses, those dollars are more likely to fund jobs, education, and investment within Black neighborhoods. It helps create community-based ecosystems where wealth can circulate, grow, multiply, rather than evaporate after one transaction. If they could cite any evidence for that, if anybody could cite any evidence for that, they should, because again, this is not how any community's wealth has been generated. And to continue to make the argument that Black people or any other group can oppressed group can solve those problems this way is just a disservice to those communities. Here they added graphic. Again, there's no citation, but they add a nice little graphic to this mythology around the circulating dollar to give it some false and undue import. But imagine the economic revolution if black dollars circulated for just one full week before leaving the community. Well, you would have to imagine it, because it wouldn't be an economic revolution, because this is not a statistic that anyone measures and has nothing to do with how wealth is generated. And this is how we go from GOAT to got him.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.